So a big thing that's been happening in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who are looking beyond the Nigerian borders. And the UK is often seen as a great location to expand, to be a springboard for the rest of the world. And the UK government, alongside the Tech Hub, have a number of other initiatives supporting entrepreneurs along their journey. And so I'm really excited to introduce our next panel, which is going to be looking about building your ventures internationally, specifically at entrepreneurs looking to expand outside the African continent to the UK. So I know we've got three of our panelists here. One is running slightly late, but I'm going to introduce them to the stage. But Stephen Mooney is our moderator from the Department of International Trade's Global Entrepreneurship Programme. He is a deal maker and an all-round amazing operator supporting entrepreneurial talent internationally. So I'm going to welcome him and the panel to the stage. He can kick us off, introduce the rest of our panel to talk about scaling your venture internationally.
Cool. Thanks for that, Anthony. Hope you can hear me all right. Great segue and a great last session. I wish I'd joined a little bit earlier. I was in another call. Oh, there's Seyi as well. So great to see Seyi as well. By the way, that link you sent in the comments, the intelligence reports that were just in that last session are a really valuable tool and an absolute essential. And as I said, a really great segue into this section about kind of what you do as you start to expand your business within Nigeria and become global. So welcome to my panelists. What we're going to do for the next 45 minutes or so is really have a conversation with two great founders that started in Nigeria and have begun a global journey. As Anthony mentioned, this is part of quite a unique program created probably 8 years ago, maybe it's a little bit longer than that, by the UK government, called the Global Entrepreneur Program. And when I say program, that's probably a bit of a misnomer. But as I said, 8 or 9 years ago, the government recognized that entrepreneurs were really important to the overall ecosystem of the UK and globally. The entrepreneurs solve many of the world's problems and challenges. They're, really grow the economy in so many ways. If you look at places, in the UK, like Old Street, where there's something like 2,000 companies per square kilometer. But entrepreneurs are a bit of a different breed. And the government recognized that while they were important, civil servants weren't necessarily the best people to speak their language. And so what they did is they went out and found entrepreneurs that had been through the journey to help contract in and work with the government to work with aspiring international founders. And so for the past 9 years or so, we've helped, the numbers are variable, but somewhere near 1,000 companies relocate to the UK and use that as a springboard to go global. And a lot of that is really teaching international founders how to speak English the way the English do. I myself went through that journey and had those struggles, and we want to talk a little bit about that today. I'm originally Canadian. I started a company in Western Canada that I took down to the Valley and raised money there. And then because I had an Irish passport, I was the one to take the business into Europe. And when I landed here, I assumed that the UK and the European and the global market was going to be the same as selling within the North American market. And I went through 3 years of painful surprises, right? Trying to build pipelines that all felt like they were going to close when they were never closed, getting yes from a lot of English companies that didn't mean a contract, and really having trouble into Europe. And so really that's the essence of what the Global Entrepreneur Program is about, is leveraging the scars from our failures and hopefully giving some insights to some of our successes. And recently, the Global Entrepreneur Program has expanded its presence so that we've also found entrepreneurs in home markets. And so I'm happy to be joined by Shirley, who's based in Africa now, to do just that. Shirley, if you could give a bit of background, and then I'm going to turn it over to Abisola and Seyi to do an introduction, and then we'll jump into a fireside chat that hopefully has some times for questions at the end. So Shirley, if you could give a bit of background on yourself and what fires you up and what you bring to the program.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on this panel. So I actually cut my teeth in the entrepreneurial world in the UK. So the first business that I was part of startup team and we built in the UK, it was a clinical laboratory. We did drug testing for big pharma all over the world. So my first experience was building a business in an environment that was really supportive of it. It was great. And when we sold it, I came home to South Africa. I'm South African. and discovered that it's not always the case in the home markets or other markets like South Africa to build a business so easily. So I've spent the second decade post that working with founders and entrepreneurs, helping them to grow their businesses, to form and to scale. I think the detail is less important, but yeah, the thing that really fires me up is working with founders who are solving problems for Africa, and the ability that we have to help them make that move over to the UK so that they can leverage all the positive and strong different characteristics of that business environment to help scale and boost their businesses. So yeah, that's me. Thank you very much. I'll pass over to Abisola.
Hi, thank you, Shirley. I'm Abisola. I'm one of the co-founders at Agnes Health, where we're leveraging AI to ensure that every woman has a safe and healthy pregnancy. Yeah, and really excited about the GEP program. It's been very enlightening. But before we go into that, I'll just hand off to Seyi.
And before we go to Seyi, so can you just talk a little bit about how long the business has been a business, where it started, and your experience, and how long it's been in the UK, and tell us a bit more about the business. We've got time to have a good chat.
You've got time. Okay, great. So Agnes started in Nigeria. Born out of a personal experience where I almost lost my baby at birth. And I realized that the maternal health problems were huge, not just mostly in Africa, really. And at the current pace, if there isn't a step change in survival and maternal health, we will never reach the global goals for maternal health by 2030. So I, used to work at Medtronic. It's a medical device company. I'm an engineer, so I started trying to hack away at the problem. And so we then invented this solution called Agnes, which essentially provides just-in-time health education to women in local African languages. And we found that made a huge difference, where only 1 in 3 women usually choose to have their baby in the hospital in Nigeria. On Agnes, 79% of women choose to go to the hospital. That's a 139% increase. Because of that decision, the women are 4 times more likely to survive pregnancy. So that impact was just phenomenal. And so we're already scaling in Nigeria. And then, I'm part of the GEP program. And of course, I started to initially was looking at it as an administrative headquarters for the company. But then in just trying to explore the market a bit more, I got into an accelerator in the UK. And every mom that we engage with, either from branding to accounting and legal, shared such interestingly traumatic stories, which was surprising for me coming from a market like Nigeria, where I thought, of course it's perfect, with the NHS. And then come to find out that in the past decade, the NHS spent over 4 billion on maternal health claims. So there's a huge gap. It's a different kind of gap, but there's a huge gap. So we're actually building our V2 product for the UK market and are launching later this year. So yeah, it's also really diversifying our income streams that way.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about local solutions to local problems becoming local solutions to global problems, right? And that's different in the UK. So I'm glad you expanded on that, Abisola, because you're saving lives, and that's a cool thing. And Seyi, you're saving lives too. So over to you.
In our own little way, yes, we are as well. Yes. So my name is Seyi. I am an electrical engineer by background, electronic, and I also then kind of spun off into software engineering after that. I was a co-founder of Melios Limited, which is a consultancy. It's been operational for about 10 years. Then we decided to set up a company called Cerebral Instinct, which I'll go into both right now. So Melios Limited is a risk management consultancy that focuses on improving operational efficiency for different industries and different sectors, saving lives, protecting lives, and the environment. So that's the key focus for the business. And over the number of years, and the key individuals within the consultancy, we built up a lot of knowledge, experience, delivering value for our clients across different sectors: aviation, predominantly oil and gas, and energy, as well as logistics, transportation, and so on. But what that led was an understanding of the gap in the market, a massive gap in the ability for organizations to really visualize and aggregate their risk across different verticals. So we saw that gap and realized that that is a very major gap in terms of, or shortfall for businesses to make risk-based decisions in an efficient way. Ultimately, a lot of people see risk and protecting, saving lives as a unnecessary cost that doesn't really impact the bottom line. And what we're trying to change is that narrative, so people understand that saving lives doesn't mean a reduction in your bottom line, but really an improvement in revenue generation. And what we wanted to do is leave a lasting solution, not just recommendations and reports and statistics. We wanted to leave a lasting tool that makes a consistent impact. So we came around and built a technology called Rivers. It's a software that aggregates risk across all verticals and allows upper management to be able to see all that data, visualize that data, and be able to make decisions that have real impact. Being able to prioritize tasks and easily justify decisions on any facility or any operations of the business to quickly then make that investment and measure that impact quickly. Again, we leverage AI, a lot of complex algorithms to do all this aggregation. So it's a lot of data work, but ultimately it saves massive amount of man hours, it saves lives, and ultimately prevents major scenarios or major events, catastrophic events from happening. So ultimately, yes, like you said, Stephen, we try to save lives as well on our end. So we were based in Nigeria, and then obviously we work globally across the world. The tool has been deployed in Angola, in Nigeria, Kuwait is coming up, and we're trialing in other regions in the Middle East.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Seyi. And both of you made the transition to the UK while in some ways you were transitioning your business to a pure technology play, right? Maybe Abisola, start with you. Why choose the UK? What's been the technology ecosystem like since you've landed? And how does that differ from the Nigerian ecosystem?
So there's a couple of questions. So first, I think I'll start with the ecosystem and then talk about the UK at the end. So first, the ecosystem here is definitely a lot more advanced than it is in Nigeria in terms of technology. So there's a lot more openness to explore new ways of solving problems. And that does make it easier for an innovator to be able to find partners early on. So for example, we've now engaged with King's College London to do a pilot for our solution in the coming months. And that's even while we're building. And we're already starting to talk to other cities like Liverpool. So it's just a much more open environment just because this is a country where innovation has made a lot of tangible differences versus in Nigeria, the same level of partnership that I'm able to get took probably 3 times as long. But what I'm also then realizing is because we're starting to gain this traction in the UK, some of the things that were kind of stuck in the pipeline in Nigeria have started to move along a lot faster just because people now realize that, we are a potential force to be reckoned with. So, and that's why the UK. It does give a level of credibility to your work, one. And then two, it shows that, okay, if it can be proven in a market as competitive as the UK and as technologically advanced as the UK, it's more readily accepted in a market like Nigeria that has so many issues to solve and not sure which one to necessarily lean into. So that's why the UK.
Yeah, thanks, Abisola. Seyi,
I do have to say that the GP did make the navigating of the process a lot. So my Dealmaker is on this call. Her name is Jude, and it's almost like having a so it's not quite mentoring, but it's more like just having an insider. That's the word that helps you kind of figure out what's in between the lines, where to be, And that is all the difference, because going into a new country with a product, no matter how successful you are, is in some ways like starting over. It's a new market. So yeah.
Totally, yeah. Seyi, could you answer the same question? Don't ask me to repeat it because I don't know how I phrased it, but
Not a problem. So for us, I think we always knew that even though we were starting in a technically challenging environment as Nigeria, that we always had that global perspective from day one. But again, just like any product, you have to have a proof of concept. You have to prove yourself on the field. So it was again, we were very fortunate to also work with international multinational companies right off the bat, that had that global outlook as well, and that international standard, because that's also quite difficult to find. And it's interesting that obviously, given the environment in Nigeria and Africa and in majority of developing countries, risk management isn't always the top of the agenda. And with regulation that is sometimes quite lax, they can get away with quite a bit. We coming in with this culture shift, is great to have those international companies to partner on, at the early stages of developing the solution. I think without those sort of partnerships, that would have made the journey a lot longer. And then being able to take that, into Angola was really great for us, and a major milestone. Currently across over 8 assets now. So it's I think that really helped helped us begin to create validity in the tool. And then we began to have discussions with the local regulators. We published a paper. Now this is where the UK really came in very handy. Working with the GEP, conversations with key individuals in key industries really opened up possibilities for opportunities. Networking is a massive part of that, and the GEP creates access to that, which was very beneficial. But for us, once that validation was achieved, we began to work with IChemie, and we published a paper in IChemie in the conference last year, Hazard 31 and Hazard 21, and it was very very well received by different global organizations and peers within the industry, and set a ball rolling, where we got a lot of inquiries globally. And this is what the UK does because of the strong regulatory framework that they have, and being able to write a paper that was well received at that stage, in that level, in that environment, really then sets the ball rolling on a global journey.
It's a legitimacy and trust issue, right?
Yes,
it's one of those things that you just need to. Part of it sometimes is just operating under English law, and part of it is operating just on kind of creating that status, and that doesn't take away from the hard yards that you had to do to get the pilots in. But now you can open up and say from the HQ that you're heading into the Middle East, as we know. Cheryl, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I'm curious to chat a little bit about what your fundraising journey has looked like to date. We're talking about scaling international markets, and obviously you need funding to underpin that. There's so much money coming into Africa at the moment. I think last year it closed on 4.3 billion US that came in. A very small amount of that to female founders, but that's a different conversation perhaps. So there is money coming in, but sometimes you need to go, offshore to look for your raises. I'm curious to know, what's your journey been like? What are you finding? What are you seeing? Abisola?
Right. So I'm in this interesting spot, female founder in health tech, which isn't necessarily the sexiest for Nigeria at the moment. I think fintech is hotter. Maybe I should have done a women's bank, maybe. But anyways, so it's been interesting. So for our pre-seed, we did have some angels prior to even coming to the UK. But now that we're in the UK, one huge thing, because we're actually launching our seed round tonight. I'm in a demo day later on this evening where I'm announcing that. And the the GEP has been amazing. So my Dealmaker pointing me to other Dealmakers to talk to who may be in that sector, or who may have connections in that sector. I remember I was at an event with Stephen and Shirley last week, and I was being told to chase after Stephen because he knew a guy at Octopus Ventures that I might need to talk to. So the GEP has been really amazing, just helping understand that landscape, who to talk to, who the right people are, and how to get those connections. And the reality is, as much as people don't want to say this, investors invest in people that they've heard of, or you need someone to kind of open that door for you. And being part of a program like the GEP, you basically have, I believe now there's, I forget the number, 16 or 20 deal makers, but 20 potential door openers, if that makes sense. So if you,
I just want to say to anyone listening at the moment that we did not ask Abisola to be quite so complimentary about the GEP. But thank you.
I just love the GEP. So I talk about the GEP all the time. Anyone who's my friend knows I'm in the GEP. And so it's just really that. And everyone's really open. Of course, it's what you make of it. So if you lean into the opportunities, all the deal makers are entrepreneurs, and you're an entrepreneur, so they expect you to be an entrepreneur about it. But so that's been really amazing, coming up with that list, deciding who to go after and what the strategy is. Even last week I was at a pitching event with GEP, and they taught us how to pitch, sales pitch versus investor pitch. So getting ready for the conversations, driving it to close, having that strategy. I've done a few accelerators before, and I'd never gotten that level of granularity of just getting it done. So I think that's really been powerful in this journey for us, and even help with applying for grants. I'm currently in a program sponsored by GEP where they're mentoring me through positioning for that. So what I've found is I'm trying to imagine what it would have been like trying to do this without the GEP. And I think it would have felt like walking into this blind, basically. That's how it would have felt.
Okay.
Yeah. So it feels like an extra pair of eyes.
Thank you. That is such a great answer. Seyi, over to you.
Yeah. To be honest, it's been quite an interesting journey. Interestingly enough, just to echo what Abisola said, it's obviously fintech seems to be all the rave in Africa at the moment, but at the same time, I think different products require different strategies, and I think what we've been quite fortunate to have at Melios Cerebral Instinct is that there was some sort of foundation, which was the consultancy. So there was an existing client base, an existing service that was being offered, and then we were coming up to build this product, meaning that there was an opportunity for revenue generated from one arm of the business to support the initial development. Because then what that does for us is that we're entering the market with a more validated product. And by the time we enter into the capital raise, it's more of, I think somebody once said at the GEP that if you're raising capital when you need it, you raise too late. You kind of have to start a little earlier. So what that does is relieve a bit of the pressure. It means that we can focus on finding the right investor, and that's what the GEP has really done. Not only once we started the program, there was so many sessions, which was absolutely amazing, to be honest. From key professionals in key industries, lawyers, all the things you need to get started. Almost like a crash course. Probably should have given me a degree after. It was really good. But ultimately, yes.
Sorry, Seyi, you raised such an interesting point, right? And we've talked about this at length. But the thing about investment is everybody thinks that that's the first thing that you need to do, and it's the sign of success as a business. But the reality is, it's as you said, sometimes the last thing to do, and it's one of the reasons I like working with Nigerian founders, because sometimes there's a level of graft that is just needed in order to validate that product market fit a little bit more before you fundraise, right? And having, in the case of Melios and Cerebral, you had the benefit of customer-driven products and then customer-driven revenue, which tells a much more compelling story as you go to raise capital. And with the GP, we've worked with some of those companies. I've worked with Kuda and Educoy, and a few of these companies have had very successful fundraisers on the fintech side, as you said, when the time is right. But there's also a number of them that really validate their concept in the Nigerian market first, because it's a very fertile market and one that seems to be open to innovation. Could you say, I know you were just back in West Africa, talk a little bit about the opportunities and the changes for entrepreneurs within the West African ecosystem, and how that helps to validate the product and drive growth?
Yes. Going back to West Africa, I think in general, as a whole, I think there's a lot of similarities across the region. There are a lot of problems. I think first and foremost, identifying that there are a lot of problems is the first stage. And with a lot of problems comes a lot of opportunities. And that is, I think, is really, really the big driver in terms of why having a startup or some sort of enterprise in that region has a good chance for success. But I think above all is the fact that there's a uniqueness to it. A lot of foreign concepts or successful startups abroad, if you copy and paste those concepts and bring them into West Africa, they most times fail. There is a lot of social nuance, social factors, regional factors, so many factors. And I think Nigerians that have grown up in that environment or are exposed to those, social economic factors stand a very good chance of being able to navigate those complexities to create a successful product that, again, resonates and addresses those problems in those unique use cases or scenarios that you wouldn't find anywhere else in the world. And that's just the truth, So challenging, but problems are there to be solved, and once you solve them, you can strike gold, basically.
In a lot of ways, it's just kind of an Abisola. It's almost a layover of the Sustainable Development Goals in many ways, right? You look at all the issues in West Africa, and it's almost just sits on top of that. But then, because of that opportunity, as you say, and you've already proven that it opens up other markets. Abisola, thoughts on that?
Right. I think I'll mirror what Seyi said about the fact that it's fertile ground, because there's just so many opportunities to solve problems. So I think it's hard not to constantly have an idea of how to solve a problem, because there's just so many in front of you. And that's why I think a lot of Nigerians and West Africans tend to be quite enterprising, just because they need to hack around so many different issues. But also because it's such a tough environment, if you can find a way to create a business model that works, and that people who have not the highest levels of spending power are willing to spend on, that is, solid product market fit that you can then build on and then potentially scale in other markets. So it does, the challenging nature of it does make it quite unique in terms of being able to make sure that this, and also because the market size is also huge. So it makes it it's difficult to ignore as a market. And I'm sure that's why we're seeing so much innovation here now.
Yeah, and you're seeing, obviously, US investment starting to come in.
Yes.
We'll talk a a little bit about that, and maybe one of the reasons, Shirley's touched on access to capital, but one of the reasons why, most founders I talk to across Africa, they naturally think that the Valley is the first place that they're going to go. And our role within the GEP is not to try to persuade companies to come to the UK, right? Because if you're an entrepreneur, you should go with what's best. But I think this is probably one of the biggest things that touches on why you would look to the UK instead, is if you're looking at, like I said before, African solutions to African problems, or African solutions to global problems. And when you're looking to go to the Valley, it should be solutions that fit within the US market, right? So if it's a product that you think is going to succeed well in the US, then that's probably your first port of call. But if it's a product that's looking to go global, probably, our recommendation is that the UK offers more windows into different markets, and then a springboard to the US. Certainly that probably fits well with Agnes.
It fits very well. So what I found with the UK is that, just in talking to other entrepreneurs and the programs I've now engaged in here, is every entrepreneur in the UK is thinking UK first and then the world. The US is such a huge market that you could think US only and still be a big company. And that's why you have that, it needs to be very US in nature and in DNA. Whereas the UK is such that even though there's a lot of funding for innovating locally, but you find that there's that support even across different parts of government to be positioned for future growth globally. Because if you're truly going to be able to create that value at a large scale, you need to be able to also think beyond the UK, even if it's across Europe. So that's I think that's such a huge difference in terms of how you think, because you start to quickly think, how do I model this for these? So even, for example, being in GP for the past year plus, I've been in sessions about going global into North America and into Canada. I attended a few sessions last summer. I attended a couple of months ago, just understanding what markets might we start with when we're ready for that journey in maybe 18 months down the line or thereabout. And we're already starting to think that way, even though we're still completely trying to land here in the UK. So it just makes you constantly thinking about the future and not getting just too comfortable, if that makes sense.
Without having to give up
trying to, I think,
as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
and trying to think about when the right time is to raise capital, where to raise it from, and which markets to expand into is something that I guess takes up a lot of your headspace. But I'm curious to ask, Seyi, I'm going to come over to you. I often get asked by founders, when is the right time to expand internationally? When is the right time to start thinking about setting up my headquarters somewhere else? And it's difficult to define, because different models, you can make that step at different stages, and depending on what benefits of, for example, a UK ecosystem you're trying to leverage. How would you answer that to founders? How would you know that you're kind of ready to start thinking about making that move? What are some of the levers?
Yes, I think there will be common, probably more, but I'll just focus on maybe three key I would say indicators. One is depending on your validation journey, what sort of product and what sort of end user you are looking to get as a client, as your customer base, your key product, the key market fit, to be honest. When you're looking at that market, certain solutions or certain products focus very local based. Some are have a very international perspective, even within other sectors like the fintech. So are you looking at cross-border payments, or are you focused on just local markets and local financial solutions? Obviously, if you're focusing on a more global stage, you would want to get to that that global perspective, or have that global HQ that helps you manage the different entities under that, or relationships across the region. but then on the funding side, it could be driven by the fact that so in one startup which I was involved in at the past, it was due to the funding that began to expand globally. It was that okay, let's set up an HQ in Mauritius or the UK, and then from there that attracted funding from specific investors who were more comfortable with certain frameworks or legal agreements or that sort of thing. So that's another driver. When you reach that stage, that can push your organization to set up an HQ specifically because of the type of investment or the profile of investors that you're bringing on. Is the last driver. And then secondly, it could also just be that your business has grown to that stage where that you begin to then look at diversifying your country risk, because you've grown, you're successful now, but then you don't want to be overly exposed in one country, and then that's where you begin to look to diversify that as well. So those are the three key.
Abisola, I would have. Oh, sorry. Continue.
Yeah. So that's it.
Abisola, I was going to come over to ask you if you had anything to add, but I'm a little bit conscious of time, so I'm going to hand over to Stephen just to maybe check if there's like a wrap-up question you'd like to pose to close.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. If anybody has questions, please feel free to put them into the comments box. I guess one quick question, Seyi and Abisola, because Abisola, you talked about kind of moving your next generation product into the UK market, and Seyi, I know we've talked a little bit about particularly oil and gas and utility within the UK market. I personally had challenges trying to reposition myself to have success in the UK market at first, right? Because it wasn't quite the same. Could you just quickly talk about how sales within the UK has been compared to global? Because many companies, use this as a headquarters base, but then go export. How have you done from, maybe Seyi, start with you from an internal perspective on sales within the UK?
Yes. I think a lot of discussions in terms of sales within the UK have led to, I would say, almost referral, so to speak. So a lot of decisions get made in maybe the UK for certain multinationals, but ultimately you are then, in terms of implementation and taking on certain discussions, you are maybe directed to the other subsidiaries around the globe, because majority of companies that in enterprise are based out of the UK have a global presence. So from a policy standpoint and from a framework standpoint, you have those discussions with the UK entity, and then those can hand it over to the particular subsidiaries, which then discuss a lot of the operational end of things. So I think the UK is a very good place to start, because then it's almost like a top-down approach rather than,
working from the other side of the octopus, right? Yeah.
So that's a very good approach, good advantage from that in terms of sales.
So, Abisola, any further thoughts on that journey? I want to have a bit of time just for final thoughts or advice to
right. Our strategy there, because we're in the health sector, is pilot then scale. So it's to pilot first with either an NHS trust or a university, and then based on those results, scale it locally there. So we're still at that stage. So we haven't actively started selling in the UK.
Yeah, and I heard a good tip last week at that same conference we were at of go talk to Eamon in Wales, where we have representation to try and pilot with the NHS.
Yes, I did talk to Eamon. You see, my Dealmaker.
See, we're doing it now. Creating the network, right? And really that's, in summary, what the GEP is about is, I think we talked about it. I say often my favorite thing is to send, let me Google that for you, because we're not here to do the job for you. We're here to assist you and get you to a level playing field faster than the 3 years that it took me in order to get there, right? So that the reality is we work with great businesses, and this was, 2 very good examples of that we we want to give every chance to succeed, but the reality is the success is going to be down to you great founders. Last minute, Abisola, we'll start with you. Any advice to people listening if they're thinking about the UK? And then over to you, Seyi.
Oh, wow. Thinking about the UK, of course, it's clear that it could definitely help take your business to the next level, and position, whether it's for access to clients or potentially new markets as well. So this is something to think about if you also want to create a global business. And of course, I can't say enough about the GEP as a route to that, and in just navigating what that means. Even things as simple as talking to women who are moms in GEP about where to live. So we talk about, yes, the business side of things, but also just understanding the realities of creating a business in the new location. It's just really powerful to have that network. So I won't take too much time because I like talking. So I'm gonna stop.
Cool. Thanks, Abisola. Seyi, one minute before we hand over to Anthony.
Yeah, so the GP is one very good reason why I would say one should pick the UK. Secondly, there's a very strong academic partnership environment in terms of strong academic partnerships that I think would serve any company coming to the UK. Talents is also another key gateway point. Then secondly, global synergy. There are very few regions in the world. North America doesn't quite, in my opinion, have that as strong of a global synergy with different regions, so Middle East, Asia. Just there's a community from everywhere in the world within the UK, really, to be honest, and those communities are usually very strong, and you can be able to tap into that all from the UK.
Perfect. Listen, guys, thanks very much for taking your time. Anthony, if you have any final thoughts, otherwise we'll pass over to you, but really appreciate the opportunity and